Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the battles prior to that of Waterloo. These battles, while smaller in scale to Waterloo, set the tone for what was to come, for both the French Empire and for Napoleon. Napoleon had been exiled to the island of Elba in May of 1814. He would stay for less than a year, but during this time he was not a prisoner. In fact, he would rule the island. He would improve infrastructure, create economic plans, and improve the overall quality of life for those living there. 300 days after his initial exile, in March 1815, Napoleon would lead a force of 1,000 men off of the island and bring them back to France. He would land in Cannes. Here he would win over the love and support of the lower class, and would be spurred to march towards the nation's capital. Before Napoleon and his forces arrived in the capital, the King of France, Louis XVIII, would flee to avoid being captured. Upon hearing the news that Napoleon had once again risen to power, Great Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia would all vow to maintain 150,000 men in the field until they had successfully overthrown Napoleon. To accomplish their goal, the combined Allied forces, which numbered around 800,000 men, had planned to march on the city of Paris. A delay for the Allies' march towards the Rhine was caused by the slow advance of the Russians. This delay allowed for Napoleon to build necessary defences around France. Napoleon commanded a force of around 160,000 men, many of whom would be sent to the French frontier in order to protect the borders. The French army would have been larger if it weren't for Louis XVIII's abolishing of conscription laws. The army would, however, add an additional 80,000 men to its ranks by summoning all undischarged soldiers back into service. On April the 27th, Napoleon had decided to attack the English and Prussian forces stationed in the southern Netherlands. The British forces were commanded by the Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wellesley, while the Prussians were helmed by Gebhard Blucher. Napoleon had hoped to defeat these forces before the Russians and Austrians could arrive. The armies of the Allied forces stationed in the Netherlands were inexperienced. Both the British and Prussian armies were filled with men who had never been in a conflict before. This was an issue because they were coming up against the French, who had, for the last 2 decades, been in non-stop war, making them hardened and ready for what was to come. The first French troops would move into the Netherlands on the 15th of June. In the first day of invasion, they would take with ease all of the strategic points which were set for them. Napoleon would position his troops into a compact formation, creating a line that would stretch for 19 kilometers. This line would create separation between both the British and Prussians, allowing for the French to battle them individually. Napoleon's first plan was to move the majority of his forces against Wellington. However, he had heard that the Prussians were vulnerable, so instead he had sent Michael Ney, his most trusted commander, to take Quatre Bras from the English. Ney would move slowly and cautiously towards Wellington, allowing him time to reinforce his position. This led to Ney fighting an inconclusive battle in which by the end of the day the Allies were still holding Quatre Bras. This one day of fighting had cost the Allies 4,700 men, with the French losing a comparative 4,300. On the same day as the battle at Quatre Bras, Napoleon was heading an attack against the Prussians that were stationed at Ligny. The Prussians would set themselves up on a forward slope so that they could fire down on the advancing French. This tactic, while effective, left them completely open to artillery barrage. The two sides would begin the battle with no clear lead. However, Napoleon had a plan up his sleeve. He would smash the Prussians from their right flank. However, to do this, he would need the aid of one Marshal Jean-Baptiste Drouet and his men. Drouet, unfortunately, was under the direct command of Ney, and because of this was marching back and forth from both battles as he kept on receiving conflicting orders. This made him completely useless in both battles. Throughout the duration of the confusion, it was becoming more and more evident that the Prussian conscripts were being worn down by the skilled French soldiers. This made Napoleon more distraught, as he knew that the Prussians were weakened, and if only he had Drouet, he could attack and finish them. Around this time frame, the men on the wing of Napoleon's formation began to report that there was a large enemy column coming up from the rear. Many of the French had even begun pulling back in fear of it. This was until it was revealed that the enemy column was in fact just Drouet and his men arriving. Napoleon was likely thrilled to finally see Drouet. However, as soon as he had arrived, he would leave, after receiving yet again more conflicting orders from Ney. During the confusion, the Prussians would attack at the center of the French line. However, they would be repelled by the famous Imperial Guard. The Prussians were, at this point, exhausted and outnumbered, and Napoleon knew it. At 7:30 p.m, Napoleon would order the attack of the Prussian center. It was successful, and the Prussian line was breached. Adolf Baron von Lützow would lead a cavalry counterattack at the French, however it would fail, and he would be captured. 2 wings of the Prussian line, however, were not collapsing as fast as the French had intended. This allowed for the Prussians to organize and make a withdrawal towards Wellington and his forces. General Blucher would have his horse shot and collapse on top of him during the withdrawal. However, he would be saved by an aide and brought back to Prussian lines. Once the battle had concluded, more than 12,000 Prussians were dead or wounded, with the French losing around 10,000. An absolutely mind-boggling amount of dead for such a short engagement. The Prussians would also lose another 8,000 native-born French soldiers to desertion. The British at Quatre Bras were also able to retreat further back with little to no resistance from Ney's forces. Allowing the retreat of both of these armies would prove to be one of the biggest mistakes that Napoleon and his men would make. But that's a video for another day. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you like this sort of video, feel free to like and subscribe. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.